pleasure to meet you again.
Thank you.
And can I get you a drink?
I'm great. If you want one,
I know. You know what? I actually brought one because I don't know if they sell it. I drink something specific. And actually, I brought the wrong one. I brought yours. So I'm not taking it out.
it's so coffee.
I drink poison. So for the caffeine. I'm just going to grab my clipboard from over here. So I do appreciate it.
Sure.
I have several questions. And
That's great. I have some questions.
you want to start?
Tell me about yourself.
Well, my name is Robyn Ross.
Right.
Like you, I am fourth generation, not just of our country, but of the city that you grew up in. I grew up in New York City. My daughter is fifth generation.
New York City.
New York City.
What part of New York City?
I was born in Queens, like Bob,
Okay.
and Lily. And I moved to Long Island to Boston when I was 15. I went to high school in Manhattan.
So you didn't go to high school in Long Island?
I went to high school in the city at Bayside for 5 weeks and then moved to Long Island. And then I also lived with my dad for a
So
little
you
bit.
continued then going to school in Manhattan while you were living. You had to commute.
I went to private high school in Manhattan for 11th grade, and I commuted and lived in an apartment in the city part-time with a friend instead of going back and forth.
So I have
some
cousins
days.
who grew up in Dix Hills in Long Island.
Okay. I have a lot of friends that live in Dix Hills right
Yeah.
now that moved there when they got married
Right.
and had kids.
Right. And when did you move to Beverly Hills?
So I grew up by coastal. My family had a home in Newport Beach.
Okay.
I'm from 7 until 32. So when I moved to California, to LA, to Brentwood, when I was 31, for the first year I still had a weekend getaway down. We moved from Newport to Laguna Niguel.
It's a lovely town.
It's a lovely town, and they just had some horrible fires,
Yes, I know.
which is devastating. But I always had a love for California. And in my 20s, traveled the country. I was in a different city every week. And
A lot of New Yorkers end up in Florida, not California.
when they get old, that's why we call them snowbirds. But Miami was always my third city.
Okay,
And it is where my dad spends time in winter. And it used to be out here, but then things changed and his California became Florida.
So you lived in Brentwood and then you ended up.
My first husband went to Beverly.
Okay.
He went to El Rodeo and then to Beverly.
Okay, well.
And so did my second husband. Actually, my second husband went to a Jewish day school and then ended up at Beverly.
Okay.
And you they both go to
Uni?
That used to be a common thing for people in Beverly Hills. If things didn't work out at Beverly, they went to uni. I knew several kids,
Okay.
guys back then. That
Did they
did
move
that.
or did they?
No, they were still Beverly Hills residents, and they also lived in the area. They were friends of my first husband.
And your daughter goes to BD?
Vista, yeah,
What grade is she?
6th.
Okay.
Do you have a child that's around her age?
I know my son is in 9th grade.
9th grade. Okay. So she just missed it.
Except he was at Horace Mann the first 6 years. He goes to now a school. His mom lives in Brentwood. So he goes to a school called the Geffen Academy.
Oh, yeah.
It's at UCLA.
Okay.
Yes, it's a fairly good school.
Why don't you have him in our district? Just
His
curious.
mom lives in
Wants-
Brentwood,
and
and I
she
live
wants
here.
him
It's
there.
sort of in between.
Okay.
So I have to sometimes make compromises.
Absolutely, 100%. I thought maybe it was issues that were within the district.
Not at all. It was K through 5 at Horace Mann. Had a really good experience. And, yeah, it's just that compromise.
Do you have a son?
I have a he lives with his mom, but he's not in town. So, but hopefully, he will be when it comes time to go to school. So that's working on that.
So hopefully you'll be involved then maybe with making a better relationship between the 5 board members and the
Well,
council.
more with the schools. I mean, one thing that I've discussed now that the council's already looking at developing a preschool program with the school district, which I think is a great idea. From my perspective, we should make that free for Beverly Hills residents and for city
I
employees.
agree with you 100%.
And, you know, that would do a few things. That would, I'm all about community, and it would establish friendships between kids that can continue from preschool through to kindergarten, throughout the entire system. And of course, their parents become friends too. So that's a way of connecting people and creating community.
And a lot of parents that are already in the district have little ones that they would enroll as well.
Right, and you know, we talk about, well, what can we do to attract young families? And you know, some people talk about affordable housing. Well, they don't really know the way
Beverly
that,
Hills is not about affordable
well, they don't,
housing.
right, and they don't know the way that works.
Right.
But if you were to offer, you know, it's time for us. All too often we treat our residents like ATM machines, and so I think it's time for us to give back. And free preschool would be a way of doing that. Now, I would open it to people from outside the district, but they would have to pay. And I'm thinking,
Why would you do that?
well,
Besides grandparents that...
no, I would say if you didn't live in the city for preschool, not for the schools. Not so if you get, by the time you get to TK or kindergarten, you have to live in the city. But preschools, because the city right now offers a preschool program, and that's open to non-residents as well. Residents get somewhat of a discount, because that might encourage them to move into the city then. And anyway, I think that would be an important step that we could take. And it looks like when El Rodeo is finished that they're not going to have a use for Hawthorne, which is why I went to school. And I know there's talk about turning that to the district office. Well, that could be the location for a world-class preschool as well. They have the facilities. So that's just an idea, but I think it's a pretty good one. And as I said, I think at least a lot of people that I'm talking to agree that this would be something we could do that no other city does and no other city offers, and it would be extremely family-friendly.
So before we can really encourage families to move in, because I know that we are losing a lot of families, and next year things will turn around, we're going to lose a lot more. And I know this as an insider, because my child's in the district, and I speak to a lot of parents.
Funny, I'm hearing from people who have, you know, that BV is a great experience. I just spoke with someone who's, I think, son or daughter graduated and has been there for 3 years, and they said it was terrific. So I'm happy to hear that.
I believe that was with the prior principal, and I'm not saying that the principal's the only problem.
Who's the current principal?
Dr. Scone, and she already knows I'm not a family first. And we can go into those.
Well, you know there is a school board election coming up, and that's in November, and that's going to be important to decide who, you know, the school board, the city really doesn't have a direct influence on the schools. We support the schools, no worries. We support the schools by giving them money, additional funds that are at a level that no other city per capita gives their school district in the state. So, you know, ultimately, it's up to the school board members to ensure that the quality of the school is at the level that it was when I was there, when people wouldn't send their kids to private school because you wouldn't get a better education.
Right. And that's why I moved here.
Right. A lot of
people
people
moved here so my daughter didn't have to go to Emerson or Palms, which was her dad's school.
A lot of people moved here because of the schools, and whereas in LA, the elementary schools, Westwood Charter and Warner Avenue, are pretty good. It's when you get them to the next level. And as said, I think our goal, I've been saying this for years, has to be for us to become a lighthouse district as we were at the time, where we were not only a reason that people moved into town, we were getting our kids into all kinds of elite colleges. It was really quite amazing. And,
well, Beverly Hills was always known for being the safest city with having the best school districts. We're now the 204th safest city in the state of California.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that report, because my question would be, where were we 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago on that same list?
Well, I can tell you just even from police response alone, because I lived in this city in 90212 at 3 different addresses.
And I'm in 90211. So.
And I'm in 90210 now, and it's awful. It is awful, and I have the footage.
Well, we really, I mean, this is important, and I know you're going to see the mail later to talk to her, but our 3-minute response time is something that is sort of, not a grail, but it's sort of a policy that everyone agrees with and we've never compromised on, and they get every resource they need. So if they're not responding for emergencies within 3 minutes,
my life was put on the line because of a call that I placed,
Tell me about it.
well, I was on South Beverly Drive and it was Friday night, and there was a guy. I'm always recording because I am creating a show, a lifestyle brand, and an organization to change all of our systems. Like you, I'm all about community, and I needed to start here first, which is why my focus is now on Beverly Hills, because this is where I've lived since August. And what I have seen happening is devastating. And I have had my own interactions with the police, but in this one in particular, I called, and I know that dispatch is not, it's not a police officer.
No, but
they need to be better trained as well. And I can tell you that, here I was recording, and so what the incident that happened was recorded. I say hello to everybody that walks by me. I think every officer should say hello to everybody that walks by them and smile. And this guy said something to me, and I didn't.
The officer, or
no, this man on the street who I knew was not a member of our community. And I didn't know it when I said hello because I wasn't looking at him.
But we welcome visitors from all over. But you're saying it's someone who wanted to create mischief or someone.
Yes, and I said hello. Not looking, not seeing it directly who I was talking to, and I would have said hello anyway because I want to see somebody's face if they're doing something bad, because I think detectives or police should be doing that too, right? They want to be able to get their eyes on everybody. And so he screamed something, and I said, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, and he screamed it again, and I still didn't hear because there was street noise, and then he screamed it for the third time, which was suck someone's dick.
Right. So, do you think he was mentally ill, or was it just a bad person?
I think most bad people are mentally ill. So I think to say people are mentally ill, I think that it's one thing if they're a danger to themselves, but it's
another thing if they're a danger to other people.
But it's a different thing if they're dangerous to others.
Right.
Or
both.
Absolutely. And there was a lot of families that were dying on South Beverly Drive. And I don't normally walk South Beverly Drive, but I'm having issues in my own building.
Where do you live on that too?
Near Whole Foods.
Okay, so on Crescent? Okay.
And
so it's you're in a residential area, but the other side of the street is business.
Yes.
Okay.
Although there is a
there's Menorah is a senior living home above Whole Foods.
Says that's the name of it?
Menorah.
How do you spell that?
Menorah, like a menorah, MENORA.
Well, it's a city-owned building that's not...
City-owned building, but the city unfortunately doesn't control the facility. It's rented out for like another 15 years or so.
I was told by the building manager there, because there was something going on there, and I spoke to lots of residents in the neighborhood about, and I finally got her information and called, and she told me that during the pandemic they moved 20 homeless people into the building, and
Menorah did.
Yes,
so
and so now the Beverly Hills, because that was our one place that we had for low-income housing for our seniors, and
except let me tell you a story about
but
that.
now there's a 10-year waiting list, she says, at least.
Well, not only that, the problem with that is years ago when the city allowed it to be built, we had, and this was way before anybody is on the council now, we made a deal with HUD that I think it's up to 70% of the residents of that facility could be Beverly Hills residents, so they could age in place, which is something we supported. And over the years, the city dropped the ball, and they just took in anybody from wherever. And there's actually now not a preference for Beverly Hills residents. So they wanted to extend the deal with us, and I think the council said no, because we want to at some point be able to take over the facility and provide a preference for residents. I've been talking about building senior supportive affordable housing over on 3rd Street and Foothill for maybe 4 years now. And again, the goal for that would be to allow Beverly Hills residents to age in place. So unfortunately, the city, years before probably anyone, not just was on the council, but even city staff was here, they completely dropped the ball on the preference that we were supposed to have at that facility for residents. And it's not run by the city, it's run by a third party, I think it's a nonprofit called Menorah, and we've had our issues with that. So that's an example where, as said, the city, there are numerous occasions where the city dropped the ball. The city dropped the ball when it came to acquiring lots 12 and 13.
Were you on the council?
No.
Because you've served a few times.
I've served a few times, but this way predates that. In fact, when I was on the council earlier, we met with the people who owned it. It was the California Community Foundation, the Huntington Foundation. I met with Antonio Hernandez, who was the head of the California Community Foundation at City Hall, and I said, hey, if you ever sell that property, please sell it to us. Your community foundation, we'd love to build a park there, whatever. And out behind our backs, they sold it to private developers.
What happened to her?
I do want to go back to something because I was happy you brought it up. You mentioned about
You're in
hearing
development.
that EVMS
That's
was
the, okay, here's
or
the
I don't
thing.
remember exactly the words you used, but
A
that was,
retired faculty.
you've heard from people that they really like EVMS.
I heard from people who have kids there that they liked it.
So,
I actually did not, full disclosure, I didn't support, I liked the K through 8 model that we had, that I grew up with. I felt if they wanted to do something, what they should have done is they should have done perhaps 7th and 8th grade at the high school, in a facility there, and then 7th through 12 at the high school on site. Because the notion was that the middle school you'll have enough people to go to the band, and that's well they could join maybe the high school people.
I can talk about the issues of EVMS all day long.
Okay, well
And we don't have all day,
Right.
so that could be another discussion.
I don't know
But
how
are you aware that 3 teachers in the last 5 or 6 weeks, two more recent weeks that were let go there?
No, I don't.
For
I've said
inappropriate behavior with children?
no, and I think that's shocking if
And
it is.
there's no transparency from the school with the parents.
Well, again, we know that's a separate governing board. I have in the past expressed sometimes frustration with the school board. I opposed the last bond because I was concerned with the way in which the money was
That's
spent.
what we talked about last night.
And what we can do is very limited, just because it's a separate governing board.
So I speak to a lot of parents, and they seem to believe that with enough pressure, that can change because of the fact that it's your money that's really
Some
missing.
of it, they
Right.
get 11 or 12 million dollars from us. But of
So,
course,
but we're missing
Okay.
like, I mean, I'd like to say it, probably upwards of 100 million, if not more.
I know they're going to need to come back for another bond, and I don't know that
and
I would
I
be
believe
supporting
that Bob had proposed to do
Bob Wonderland.
had proposed in 2018, I think it was, to do an audit, like an independent audit,
So
and he was shut down.
we had an independent auditor at the city, which the council majority sort of shifted the function. I wish we would still have it.
I think it
that's-
needs to be somebody that's not involved at all with the city.
Well, I think it's valuable. It certainly shouldn't be someone. It should be someone who reports, I
That's
believe,
okay.
to the
That's
council
all right.
as the representative
No,
of the
that's
people,
all right. I'm new
and
to
not
this
to city
too,
staff.
so-
I think it should be selected by the people.
I know you're.
Well, I don't know that there are cities with an independent city auditor. That could be a function, but the idea was for to. That said, again, we wouldn't have jurisdiction over
Do
the
you
city.
know about the scandal in Boston, New York?
No, I don't.
It was the largest scandal to date that I'm aware of. They made a movie out of it. I believe it was a kid in their newspaper that I think they did bring it out or something. I could be wrong about that. I didn't see the movie. But I mean, there's parents that are investigating themselves, and they need to support because, and I would think that council, being that you're all Beverly Hills residents and are representing all the stakeholders of Beverly Hills, it's everybody's money, and everybody should be concerned about it.
Well, I agree, but it's as said, it's different than in sometimes some other states. There are other states where school system is a municipal affair, and there's not this sort of separation of church and state. I don't know why in California you have this distinction. There's probably a historical reason, but the schools are considered a state agency, and they have their own trustees, and we try and be supportive of them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as you know, we have so much to do to try and run everything else. That said, as a parent and as a resident, I've in the past expressed
as a fourth generation.
I've expressed concerns, as said, and I openly, it's on the record, opposed the last bond because the bond before that, I feel there wasn't transparency. They wasted money, and I was concerned it would happen again. And guess what? So, that to me is a source of concern. But anything they can do to make the schools better is great. And as said, my ideal would have been not to have a separate middle school, which is basically copying what other districts do. It would have been, though, because at the high school you have, you used to have maybe 50% more students there. You have enough space there. So if you wanted to have the kids have...
At this point, we don't have the space
because of construction. But,
right.
But when it's finished...
But when is it going to be finished? The thing is, it was supposed to be finished.
I agree.
It's been years, and nothing's happening.
Have you
ever driven by the construction
Yes,
site?
of course, I've walked by. It's very frustrating to think that it's not finished. And when you look at some of the things that we've done, City Hall renovation, which is going to be finished by, I believe, June, on, basically on budget, I believe, and on time. It's a whole new world of school finance and school construction. And again, it would behoove all of the parents to get really involved with that. Again, I don't think I would support another bond just because they need to prove that they can give us value for money. For me, it's one thing to say that, when we charge the residents taxes and that sort of thing, it's kind of our duty to try and provide them the highest
level.
Since
they say that you give them money because you use the facilities.
That's the arrangement. You're not allowed to just give another agency money. That's a gift of public funds. It's not legal. So it's set up as a rental agreement.
Okay. But AYSO is part of that, and they're not really...
No, AYSO, I think, pays... So the city rents the space from the schools, and then AYSO rents the space from the city.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, so I do have a few questions.
Sure.
What is your stance on asking?
And I actually, it's not something that's flying out of nowhere.
When I was mayor, I created a task force consisting of some of the... We're lucky, we're blessed to have some of the greatest medical experts around. We had Jonathan Fielding from the UCLA's Fielding School of Medicine. We had Sam Torbati, who's the head of the emergency room at Cedars. We had Eric Pasalsko, an internationally renowned infectious disease, and so on and so forth. David Agnes. I'm not an expert. I kind of, have to. I'm not a fan of masks.
You also have to know that Big Pharma is putting people's jobs on the line as well. So.
Well, I try, but I have to say, on a local level, that may be true on a national level.
Yeah, but locally it's happening. It's not, especially if it's happening at Cedars or UCLA. It has to be happening at Cedars or UCLA because they're the biggest hospitals here.
Well, but I trust those experts. We have personal relationships with them.
We all have personal
relationships. And so I would be advised by them. This is not something that I can make.
But you've heard about kids passing out. You heard about at least one.
I think, as
there was one that passed out that I fought in the high school, and my body is injured.
Well,
I'm sure people are tired of hearing about it because I talked about it.
Well, I think we need to, either trust the experts or not. I'm not convinced.
So, but they're experts say.
Well, I'm not talking about CDC or anything like that. That's why I wanted to.
No, I'm not talking about them either. The experts say that it's not effective or healthy to mask. Not only that, but think about this. You want to stop this decline here? We need a law that says that you can't mask because the only people that wore masks before are the criminals.
Well,
and they are the ones still wearing them.
In Germany, there are anti-mask, or pre-pandemic, there were anti-mask laws for that reason.
And there should be. And there should be because you know what's going to happen? I have to tell you, I don't know who to sue at this point. If my body doesn't get better. And I don't know if that mother is suing at the school. I mean, we have two teachers that literally told all the other children that this child was faking it when she was passed out foaming at the mouth, and another little boy was holding her hand for 30 minutes.
So at schools, that again is a school board issue. But personally, I don't have a problem wearing a
But
mask.
lawsuits
Yes,
are
no
lawsuits
rush
for county
either,
for the
but
city.
No,
For the city.
no, they would sue the school district, not the city.
I know, but it still affects.
But I don't have a problem, like when I go to Disney Hall, I'll put on a mask if they tell me to, I'll listen to my
Yeah,
music.
but not
Oh, my
everybody
goodness.
can. My daughter has
Wow,
asthma.
that's
You want to know
exciting.
something?
It's
When she
great.
called me at school, because, and she's never had, she didn't have any asthma at all until she had the first shot.
Okay,
I had to take her to the emergency room.
So you mean the vaccination?
Yeah.
So you think that asthma was caused by the vaccine?
Well, for sure, yes, in her case, because she only got asthma when she was sick before.
Right.
And your name again?
So for me, it's allergies.
She did.
Tracy.
Okay,
Allergies. So for
allergies
example,
and illness. Okay.
so for example, if I'm near a horse, I'm allergic to horses, I'll get asthma.
Yes.
Or dust or smoke. If someone smokes a cigarette.
Well, for her, it's more when she would get
Right.
sick or
Right.
sometimes with allergies. But
Yes, right.
we had COVID and she never ever had asthma during that whole time.
So is that maybe one of the, we hear about the long-term effects of COVID? Is that
Well, no, no. She literally had a breathing trouble, and I had to bring her to the ER days after she
Well,
had.
some people at the beginning who got COVID, that was one of the, they had to be
No,
intubated.
but this was like 3 or 4 days right after she had this shot. The point of that
So
is
she got COVID right after she got the shot?
no, she had COVID the December before.
Oh, so
And
she had COVID and then
and she never had asthma the entire year.
and then she got vaccinated.
And then she got
And then she got COVID again.
no, but she got she had to be taken to the ER for
I said, there's
But-
again not a doctor that studies on long-term effects.
But so when I went to the school, because she called and she's never done this her entire life having asthma, she called me and said, Mom, I need you to come get my asthma medication. And so when I walked,
She have an inhalator.
an inhaler. And so when I got, and she only takes it as needed. And so, she hadn't taken it she hadn't taken it since she was hospitalized in 2019 for RSV, which lowered her oxygen levels.
What's RSV?
It's a
Respiratory
viral.
And that was from COVID?
No, that was in 2019 in the early
So that was
spring.
before COVID.
In the early spring, and she hadn't had asthma at all that whole time. So when I walked into school with her inhaler, she's sitting in the nurse's office, and the nurse's aide, whose mask is down to here with her nostrils sticking wide out. I looked at my child who's wearing her mask. I said, "What are you doing? Take your mask off." And she said, "No, Mommy, I have to keep it on." And the nurse's aide said, "Yeah, she has to keep it on." And I looked at her and I said, "But yours is off." And she rolled her eyes and walked away. And I walked in and I said to my daughter, "You have to take it off." She can't touch it. And I was very concerned. And I had a conversation with Dr. Scone that day.
Well, it sounds like the
Yeah, that
schools
was
could have
all.
handled it a lot better.
They could handle a lot of things a lot better. And there's a lot of issues there. And like I said, I'm hoping that council will take more of a stand since the board is...
Well, let's hope that it doesn't come
Well,
back.
we really
right?
only have one person on the board that's really advocating for the kids.
Who's that?
That's Gabe Haley.
He's not.
And that's
He's
very
not running. He's not
sad.
running for re-election.
Well, are they allowed to run for the board?
Sure.
Oh, I didn't know.
No, Gabe he's filling in for someone who left, and so
Or was...
he was appointed, and so he could
Well,
run if he wanted
He
to, but
wasn't. He was
appointed.
He applied.
he applied and was appointed by.
Right.
But he told me he's not running again. So.
Well, that's very disappointing.
And I
to
know Gabe. He's
I
a
don't know
local
if,
guy.
if the parents know that, because we really are like, he's our only hope at this point. So I still didn't get a straight answer. Do you support masking?
I will support what the medical, I'll have to look at what the medical experts recommend. I can't say one way or the other, but I do support in situations like you've suggested, if there are issues for people, taking that into account, being sensitive about it, taking a nuance.
They were even discriminating.
And taking a nuanced approach. I don't, as said, if there's a medical reason not to wear a mask, then that's a legitimate one. And not just because I don't want to, but clearly I think that the science shows that not just about COVID, but masks do help the right kind of masks do help prevent disease transmission. But again, these are issues that
we can argue about, but we won't.
Right.
We
won't
I
also,
disagree.
and let's hope that it doesn't come back. Right. This was in the past.
So, on that same topic, do you support mandating, which mandates aren't laws, we all know, but do you support
vaccines?
Yes, for to be allowed to go to school.
So for school is a trickier issue. I do support them for employees of the city, for example, public safety employees.
So what about the police? Because I know that they weren't.
Well, police don't come into contact in the same way as, for example, paramedics. If someone is giving mouth to mouth,
but sometimes the police show up as paramedics.
well, they're not supposed to. So,
and they do pretty get close to people.
I would be okay with the system the way it was, which was that for paramedics and people who, because we have a lot of seniors in Beverly Hills, and we had a situation in which when some of the paramedics and firefighters said they weren't going to get vaccinated, I was getting feedback from residents, and I know a lot of them seniors, who said, if something happens, don't call 911. That's unacceptable to me. So to me,
I think it's unacceptable to have allowed them, you know, before they came up with these shots, to call on people and risk their lives, and nobody had a problem with it. So I think it's a little bit contradicting.
Well, I you know, again, I don't know that that was the case, because whatever protections were available at the time, we tried to use.
Yeah, but so
you have a new
still use those.
But you have a new tool in the suite of toolboxes.
But they weren't proven, and they were for emergency use.
So there is where we may disagree: is are they effective or not? Because let's say they invent a new kind of fire hose, and it's going to, you know, be able to put out a fire in half the time of the existing one. Even if it's experimental, we may decide to use it. So let's hope that we have now more medical evidence about it. In general, vaccinations, I think, are...
Do you think vaccine mandates when you walk into a restaurant that you should have to have a vaccine card to dine there?
I think that's up to the individual restaurant, isn't it? You know, in many cases, the businesses can and should decide for themselves. But I think we're past all of that. That's the good thing.
You don't think that things are going to turn around right before or after this election?
I hope not. And I also think that, as said, the military already requires, 19 vaccinations?
Yeah, but they've been injecting our military with experimental things the whole time, and that's terrible.
They should not be using experimental things. I agree,
this is experimental. This is experimental.
Well, this is, you could argue
it's emergency use.
It's emergency use. And I think
that's experimental. It's experimental. There's no history on it. I have to tell you, I have friends, not in the city, but whose husbands are dropping dead.
Can I tell you, there are other people who will tell you that they have family members, elderly ones, who've gotten COVID, and they feel because they have been vaccinated.
There was a lot of lying with it. Also, what people died for. But in consideration for your time.
Sure.
Let me ask you. So I'm good. I'm good until I have more time.
You have like 10 minutes.
No, I don't.
I think you're going to meet the mayor.
At 2.
Oh, I thought at 1:45, but I have to go now.
So, do you support the George Gascon recall?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I support it, and not only do I support it, I think as opposed to...
Are you signed?
Sure.
Because I brought mine with me.
I signed. And not only that, I think if you look at the Gavin Newsom recall, the problem was there was...
Election fraud.
Well, no, there just was no viable alternative. And...
Oh, I don't know about that.
Well, I think if you look at it, you know, he was able to paint Larry Elder as a Trump kind of person. We need to
Aren't you a Republican?
I am a Republican. And I like Larry Elder, but...
And are you a Trump supporter?
I'm not a huge Trump supporter, no.
Why is that? He's just a great guy from Queens
helps
people.
From Queens, because I like his stance on Israel very much. But I
growing up in Queens, I knew him too. We were so excited to go to these,
And I know he's considered an outsider in Manhattan, but anyway, we won't go into that
He's
now.
not really. My family's living in apartments and Trump buildings. Let me tell you something. If anybody knows how to secure their buildings for their residents, it's him.
Okay, so not a fan of Trump, but that said, okay, sorry, where were we at? Gascon, yeah, sorry, but there wasn't really a good alternative, I think, and we saw that in the vote. At least whether you think that Larry Elder was viable or not, clearly the residents of California do.
I think there was election fraud, just like I think there was in 2020.
There may have.
And I'm afraid there could be here.
Yeah,
I'm aware of our mailings.
Right.
So
I'm concerned in Beverly Hills at a local level where a few votes can sway the election. I think there probably is.
Why do we have so many days?
I am in favor of.
Why do we need mail-in and 11 days and then 4 days at 3 other locations?
So I'm absolutely in favor of, for example, even in Sweden where I live, you have to show ID requirements.
We need to do that.
I don't have a problem with that. I'm concerned about ballot harvesting. I think that's a procedure that they're allowing in California.
I think that we need to.
But personally, I just knowing what California is. But let me go back to my point.
But before because you guys are council, and we didn't open our, our in-person voting yet. Why can't we just say everyone has to bring ID? Everyone that lives here has ID.
So we are not allowed to because we'd be sued by the state. I wish we could. We're not allowed to in California.
We're a city.
We don't have those. Look, I mean, we can have a longer. If we had more time, I'd tell you about all the ways in which Sacramento is trying to preempt us, including when it comes to land use, because they're saying that single-family neighborhoods are racist and immoral and evil, and they want to take away the power of us.
Who's running the city? Who's running the state? So it's
So that's my point. They have the ability to preempt us. So we could say you need to show ID. We'd be Rob Bonta, who's the Attorney General, and we need to get rid of him too. And I'm supporting. He's actually a Beverly Hills guy who grew up in Beverly Hills.
We always required ID. Why?
No, we didn't. You're not.
I was asked always to show my ID no matter where I voted up until 2020.
So as said, we've now allowed ballot harvesting. There are a host of issues that are a problem. We know that voter fraud occurred in Beverly Hills in an election like 12 years ago. We know that voter fraud in the sense that people who didn't live in the city voted here. We documented it. We went door to door and knocked on doors. Does so-and-so live here? No, hasn't lived there. We found
I'd like to do that now.
Well, I can tell you that people on my campaign are looking at people who are registered at business addresses, which you're not allowed to do, and we're reporting that to the registrar.
So people that work in the city can't vote here?
No, of course not. You have to live here. Those are the rules. But going back to the original point was that there needs to be an alternative to George Gascon. And I would urge you to look at my friend John McKinney's website, which is proportionaljustice.com.
Hold on, what is it?
Proportionaljustice, one word, .com. And John McKinney is an even-headed, compassionate, sensitive guy who understands that any potential criminal justice reform can never occur at the expense of public safety, and that you cannot erase the victims of crime. You'll see there, hugging the victims.
I was a victim of crime here in Beverly Hills.
So that's why I'm saying.
In October,
that's why I'm
by
saying,
our police department.
Well, our police department are so well paid and so well compensated, and they need to understand.
Well, I think there are certain people that are corrupted with them.
Well, they're here to serve the community, and
I'm not saying all of them.
I think for the most part that's the case, and they need to sometimes be reminded. Growing up, there are many communities in which people see a police officer and are skeptical and are scared. And we always grew up if you saw a police officer, call him Officer Bill and wave and shake their hand. They're your friends. That was something very unique. There's that whole notion in Beverly Hills of police and community. Police and community together. But as said, I think there needs to be an alternative to Gascon. And I think John McKinney is an alternative. He's opposed the policies of Gascon from the get-go and explained why. And he's not just saying we don't like Gascon for whatever. He's explaining in detail why his policies are bad.
Do you think that the councilmen, including yourself, you bottomless, do you think and Lily, do you think that you guys could have done more with promoting that, like by having people? I mean, I remember when there was people with booths in the city for Gascon,
we are restricted about what we can do with public funds. That said, I've invited John McKinney to.
There's plenty of people that would volunteer, and you guys know.
Well, Lily has donated a lot of money. I think she's very much involved. And as I said, I've been working with John McKinney. I've had him to come to some of my campaign events to talk about specifically why Gascon's policies are wrong, not just this demonization.
I mean, I think you should have these at, wherever you want.
We have had those. We've had the petitions at some of our campaign
You
events.
have.
And we certainly talk to people about, ultimately at this stage it's about money, because in California to qualify something for the ballot you need to gather signatures. And
I think
signatures
we have,
are money.
I think there's over like 600,000 right now.
Well,
at least.
if they do, then they will have reached it. But the fact is, they always need a buffer. And I'd heard that they were falling short with money. I wish Rick Caruso could have single-handedly bankrolled it. I mean, here's a guy who's a multi-billionaire. If he wanted to, he'd pay, what is it, $20 a signature? Could have, it's as so much in our political system, and I don't think this is a good thing. It's about money.
I do have another question.
Sure.
What is your stance on creating a health department for Beverly Hills?
I just don't think that we're big enough. I understand why people would like the idea that if a pandemic ever happens again, that we could take what was a bad.
We're not out of it yet.
But what was a bad decision by the county Department of Health. But you have to look at the other cities that have actually created their own health departments. Berkeley, much bigger city than us, I think 3 times
I know,
the size.
Pasadena and Long Beach too, but here's the deal. There's 58 counties in California, and I think it's 11 or 13 counties that are the same size as our city,
But
or less.
They don't have a choice. As a county entity, they have to do it. It just seems to me that we're exploring it, but I think to do it right, you look at the amount of money we would have to spend, and you think of the other ways we could. We need to try and integrate ourselves better, I think, into county Department of Health. And again, if the main reason to do this isn't to provide services for our residents, but just in the event, again, of a pandemic, to be able to say, we're going to allow dining or whatever, I don't think it's worth it. It's just a cost benefit to me. But again, they're doing a study. I'll be open to it. It just seems to me that we would be better off doing maybe other things with that money. The talk is,
Like what?
well, for example, and again, this wouldn't be extra money, but maybe we should become a charter city. You know that we're not allowed to prosecute our own, going back to Gascon, to prosecute state misdemeanors because we're a general law city. The only way we can do that is if we go to Gascon and get permission from them to do so.
I agree. We definitely should have our own district attorney.
Well, no, not district attorney. City prosecutor that can prosecute state misdemeanors like trespassing, resisting arrest, and so on. Again, I think there's certain. I think there are certain things that we do not want to prosecute, like, someone smoked a joint or something like that.
Oh, people are smoking joints all over our city. When I was holding an interviews the other day in Beverly Gardens, with each person that I sat with, at one time you got a huge whiff.
Well, by the way, smoking, we're largely a smoke-free city. So.
I know, I heard you were in charge of one of the people that
Yeah.
was, by the way, that gas station, the one that's allowed. He was cursing me out one day because I needed air in my tire and I ran out without any.
He wouldn't give you air unless you bought something?
Unless I filled up my tank.
That's not
and I
right.
ran out without money. And I explained, I said, I'm a single mom. I just went to school.
That's not
I don't
right.
have my thing. I said, and he said, and he was awful. And at
That's
one
not
point
right.
he took out his camera and he starts like, and I actually didn't have mine. I'm not talking too seriously. She won't ask me. It was awful. And he said, where were you when I was fighting for, he didn't care.
Fighting to allow for people
He
to
didn't
smoke?
care because I was a resident of Beverly Hills. So he hates residents of Beverly Hills. Why do we have people and businesses that hate Beverly Hills?
What can I tell you? I guess that proves we made the right decision, not allowing him, what was it, we wanted a 20-year exemption or something.
But didn't he get what he wanted?
No.
Oh.
No, not at all.
But he's allowed to sell cigarettes?
Till the end of the year.
Oh, that's why.
Transition.
Okay, now.
So yeah, so in other words, we have a city prosecutor, but not allowed to prosecute. If we became what is known as a charter city, not only would we have certain more rights than what is a general, again, this is very much inside baseball, but we wouldn't have to ask Gascon for permission. So there may be advantages to being a charter city, for example. That I would support.
That has nothing to do with schools.
Again, there's no way that the city in California can take over the schools. That's just not allowed. They'd have to change state law, and of course they'd never do that.
Is it like that in other states?
No, other states are different. As I said, I think there are other states where municipalities are in charge of schools. It's a state-by-state thing. But unfortunately, Sacramento is trying to take more and more decision-making power away from cities, and that's something that I have fought against. As a communitarian, I think we should have more decisions made closer to home and not fewer. And this is a big threat to us, not just when it comes to zoning and urban planning and housing, but that's the biggest threat. They want to try and force density upon cities, and one of the reasons is because developers give them a lot of money, and special interests give them a lot of money, and they have this false narrative about affordability, about equity, about the environment, that if you force density on cities, it's going to help all of those things. None of those false narratives are true, and I could in great detail talk to you about why they're false.
What's happening in our schools, even with what they're doing, there's no transparency. I mean, if you saw the videos and the lessons that they are teaching our fifth graders, these sex ed classes.
Well, they're not teaching. I don't think they're teaching critical race theory.
Oh, they are.
Really?
100%. Yeah, and even in the last board meeting, like Mandy said, like that to Gabe, we should, she just like I would trust an attorney to do their job, we should trust the educators to do theirs. And
that may be true, but you need to have oversight. You can't just trust them too much. You can't let.
I think they should know. They should see a video that said that has grandpa. It's a grandpa talking about rock hard romaine and mushy tomatoes.
Okay, so listen, we've all heard the expression, the inmates shouldn't run the asylum. And again, I don't mean to compare any of our employees or any employees with inmates, but really we need to have some sort of oversight. Now that said, as you know, the school board is literally paid nothing. The city council is
School board is paid nothing.
Nothing. Zero.
Oh, the school board?
Yeah.
I thought you meant the superintendent.
No, the superintendent's paid a lot.
Yes.
The city employees are paid a lot.
Right.
But the people who are supposed to do the oversight are doing that out of love for their community. And
or other things. Some people are incentivized otherwise. Do you think Robyn Rowe was running for a school board?
I don't know, but
he's got no child. He doesn't support. He doesn't believe. I mean,
some people want their name in the paper. Who knows why people run? People have different motivations. People have different.
He said that he was invited to or asked to by council.
I mean, we don't ask people to run for school board. I mean, not officially, not at all. So anyway, we should probably.
One quick question, because
Sure.
You've been doing this a long time, and so are your partners right now. Would you like to see, would you be happy if there was some change and you were partnered up with some fresh blood or?
So to me, the notion of fresh blood alone is not a good enough excuse unless you have, and I know you may think this, that people aren't, this is not us.
What do you mean?
I think it may be LA. No, it's Beverly Hills. Look, I have my differences with some of the other council members. My voting record's pretty clear. I'm probably the council member who has been the lone vote on a 1-4 vote the most of anyone who's there. That said, I value the experience of the council. I'm able to work with them, and I do think I represent not only geographically, but certainly I'm the only council member who's from 90211, which is a significant chunk of the city's population. I think representation matters. I kind of think we probably should.
Well, I think being 4 generations and having a child that's 5th is something too.
Well, but we should probably divide up the city into segments and have each area has its own representative, because there is the possibility that after this election that all 5 council members could be from north of Santa Monica. We're less than a third of the population there. So representation matters. I think that the current council, and this is my honest opinion, has been faced with a series of unprecedented challenges. And I know you disagree with some of the things.
Well,
but
I don't believe the crime. I believe the crime could be prevented.
Well, I think that we have not only been faced with a series of unprecedented challenges, I think we are taking action that itself is unprecedented, and I think that we've gotten out of COVID on the other side, which I do believe it's the other side, pretty good. And the question is, could any of the challengers do better? And I'm not convinced of that. So I'm happy to work with anybody, and I'm more concerned about retaining a voice that I feel is unique, which is unapologetically pro-resident voice, who doesn't take donations from special interests, doesn't solicit
I read
endorsements
that
from
about
PACs.
you.
I will
did.
not take an endorsement from city public employee unions, because we're supposed to negotiate their contracts.
And I have
with
to
them.
tell you, I have gotten more flyers, and they're all over this sidewalk,
Yeah.
grounds too,
Yeah.
from Bob, from Lester, and really.
Yeah. Well, I also believe that elections should be won and not bought. I think people with the best ideas should win, and not those with the biggest megaphones. And ironically, I have served on the council the longest, but my feeling is in this election, and I've been at many forums, I think I'm the one who's coming up, because of my experience, maybe informed by the experience, with the most and the best new ideas, if you will, that are responsive to developing situations. And so I think actually experience is a positive. And I'd be happy to serve with anyone, but as said, I feel that in general, that even though I'm the dissenting vote in many cases, I think the council's doing a pretty good job. So people don't understand what it takes sometimes. It's not easy.
I know any volunteer in a position like this is
Mainly volunteer.
Right. I mean, it's $9,000-$10,000 a year, right?
Something like that. you know.
Right. I think it varies between candidates.
No, you get like $900 a month.
Okay. So, it's pretty much volunteer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for the time, someone
Right.
said it's the world's only 24/7 part-time job. And I look at it that way too. Each day I wake up, because I feel so connected to the community, I think, what can I do to connect us even more? What can I do to make the community a better place? And, sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes all of us are wrong, but I think that's what community is about. And as said, for me, the big fight now is that there should be more local decision making, not less, and we need more community and less Sacramento. And
And our police department, do you think that, what's your thoughts on
we're hired, as you know, we're entering into a new memorandum of understanding. It's going to raise salaries. That we're hiring.
I don't know that I agree with that without having that full evaluation. You can't just raise people.
Well, no, we're putting them on a par with the fire department. How they got under the fire department is a question nobody can answer. In most cities.
So I didn't even check the fire department salary. You mean they make more than the police?
Yes.
Well, I mean.
And they make a lot, by the way. So.
The police make.
They make a lot. Total compensation you have to look at.
It's almost $500,000 a year.
Not.
It's just under.
No, it's like 300.
The police are just under with all their.
It's not that much, but it's.
That's a lot. In New York City, the average is $65,000.
No, right, but that doesn't include benefits. But anyway, my point is that I think we are doing a series of unprecedented measures, combining hiring more police, making sure that the salaries are competitive.
And who's doing the hiring?
The department and our HR department. And again, hopefully we get the right. In the past, there's been somewhat of a lack of transparency. They would reject certain candidates or disqualify them on the basis of.
So do you know, like the procedure, how many people they're going through, like how many interviews or?
The exact number I don't, and I don't know I do know that there's a high percentage of people they reject because they don't meet the standards. Now, in the past, it used to be if you smoked a joint once 5 years ago, you were DQ'd. That to me is wrong. We need to be getting the right people, because if they don't, we open ourselves up to liability.
And what kind of training are they going through when they come here?
They get extensive training. It's vetted by the state. The chief was telling me about that, and it all needs to be at a level that is state qualified.
Well, I think training is really needs to be revamped.
Well, training is an important part. It's important that training, not only do they show respect for the community, which I think most of them.
They don't.
Well,
unless they know who I am.
Then that's an issue.
They decide not to be nice to me.
That is an issue. Our police should be.
They say they don't know me.
They should be customers. Look, to me, customer service.
I don't think I'm threatening, do you?
You're not threatening, and most of our residents are not. So there needs to be customer friendliness. And again, you should talk to this, because we have a tradition. Again, having grown up here, where the police would go out of their way.
I know. That's why I'm here.
Well, that needs to be reinstated.
Come back. So we're going to work on it together.
Okay. I got to run.
I know. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
Yeah, you
it
take
really
care.
was.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Take care.
Turn the camera off.